right, so we will not be long on today at all. We just have a review of our lessons that we learned this week. Well, our lesson, we only learned one this week. Let's go ahead and get started going over your books of the Bible and your memory scripture. So, first grade, let's start with New Testament, Matthew.
Matthew, Mark, Luke, John, Acts, Romans, First Corinthians,
First Corinthians, Second Corinthians, Galatians, Philippians, Colossians, First Thessalonians,
Second Thessalonians, First Timothy, Second Timothy, Titus, Philemon.
Okay, and this week, not that. Sorry, and this week's books will be Hebrews, James, First Peter, Second Peter, First John, Second John, Third John,
Jude,
Revelation. Awesome. In second grade, your memory scripture is Psalm 118:24.
This is the day the Lord has made. We will rejoice and be glad in it. Psalms 100.
Okay, Psalms 118:24. Good. All right, so let's go ahead and review. So remember this week, all we talked about was the crossing of the Red Sea. The Hebrews, they had to cross the Red as they left Egypt, what happened whenever they left the land of Egypt. So I'm just going to review our lesson. That's it. Our Bible test will be up on tomorrow, okay? So it's not due on Friday this week. The Bible test is due on tomorrow, which is Thursday, okay? So since we only have one lesson, because we have a half day on Friday, so we're not going to worry about doing that on Friday, okay? So if you remember, guys, the Hebrews have finally been set free from their captivity in the land of Egypt. After the final plague, Pharaoh had enough, right? Because he lost his son during this plague, and he was like, okay, get out, guys. He said, go, please go. And so he forced the Hebrews to leave the land of Egypt, which was good for them, right? Because they wanted to go anyway. So they began to journey and travel to the promised land, because that's where they are going. They are leaving the land of Egypt to go to the promised land, the land that God had promised to give to Abraham. So they're going back to the land. So Pharaoh forces them out. They leave and they begin their journey to the promised land. As they begin their journey in the wilderness, what do they see that is really strange to them? But then they quickly realize that it was the Lord. What did they see? You can just tell me.
A cloud.
They saw a cloud, right? They saw a cloud, and what was special about the cloud, it's like the cloud was leading them where they were going. So if the cloud would stop, they would stop. If the cloud would turn, they would turn. And this was the sign that God was showing them that he was with them and that he was leading and guiding them. So during the daytime, they followed the cloud, but what was it at night? A pillar of fire at night. And that was God's way of showing his people he was with them always, whether it's daytime, nighttime, he was there. So when they began to journey, the cloud ended up stopping near the Red Sea, and that's where the people decided to rest and camp for the night. Back in Egypt, though, Pharaoh, after his grieving is over, he realizes he let the people go. He realizes that his city, the things that they were doing for him as slaves, they wouldn't have that anymore. So Pharaoh decided that it would be a good time for him to go and get the Hebrews and bring them back to the land so that they could become slaves again. Now, that was a foolish thing of Pharaoh to do, right? Because the Lord had already, sent all the plagues to warn you to let his people go. And now he's trying to go and get the people of God back. So Pharaoh, him and his soldiers, they get together, get in their chariots, and they begin to journey to go and find the Hebrews so they could bring them back to the land of Egypt as slaves. So when the Hebrews were near the Red Sea, all of a sudden they hear a loud noise, and when they look, they see that it is Pharaoh and his army. Now there's a problem. They were kind of stuck, right? Because what was in front of them? The Red Sea. And who was behind them? Pharaoh and his soldiers were behind them. And so the people were they were very afraid of what could happen. They were like, we can't go forward because the sea is there and we can't turn back because that's where Pharaoh's army is, right? So what do the people begin to do? Do they start to pray? Do they ask the Lord to help them out? What do they do when they realize they had nowhere to go?
They panic.
Yes, they start to panic. They start to blame Moses. They were like, Moses, why would you bring us here? We're going to die. They were like, oh gosh, Moses, this is not good. What are we going to do? We're going to be brought back as slaves in Egypt. They kind of were in fear because they didn't know what would happen to them. They were all very afraid and very scared when they have forgotten that the Lord had showed himself to them several times, right? He did all the plagues in Egypt, which showed his miraculous power. He made Pharaoh let them go, right? The Lord has been fighting for the people, but it's like they forgot that all of a sudden the Lord was on their side and that he was fighting for them. But thank God Moses knew how to pray and what to do. So Moses says, guys, listen. The Lord is with us. He already promised us that he would keep us, that he would protect us, that he would bring us back safely to our land. He says, listen, stand still and you'll see the salvation of the Lord on today. You will not have to do anything. He's going to fight for us. And so the people, they didn't have a choice, right? All they had to do was just trust in what Moses said. So as soon as they've decided, okay, well, we're going to listen to Moses, the cloud then moves behind them. Why did the cloud move behind them?
Because the cloud made Moses.
Fog. Yes, because the cloud ended up turning into fog for the Egyptians. So it moved behind them and rested on the ground where it made more of fog for the Hebrews, or for the Egyptians, would slow them down. So this gave the Hebrews time to kind of escape, basically. So then the Lord commands Moses to put his rod over the river. And what does the Lord do when Moses does this? The Lord ends up pushing the sea back into two walls, and he made a dry path for them to cross over to the other side of the sea. So the Lord split the Red Sea for the people, something that had never happened before. This was a miracle that the Lord was performing. And not only was he just performing this miracle, but he was doing this for his people. This was something that had never been done before on the face of the earth. It had never happened, but God did it for his people. So the Lord split the sea for the people, and they were able to cross over through a dry path. And so although Pharaoh's army sees all of this, they probably should have thought to themselves, maybe we should leave them alone. Maybe the Lord is about to fight for them. But instead, they decide they were going to cross too, right? So the Hebrews are still crossing, and Pharaoh's army is still coming behind them. But as soon as the last Hebrew crosses over to the other side, what does the Lord do with the waters? He brings the waters down, completely down. And since the waters came down, it destroyed not only Pharaoh's army, but also Pharaoh as well. So the Lord indeed did fight for them. And did they have to do anything? No. They didn't have to lift a hand, a finger, and nothing. They simply just crossed over like the Lord told them to do, and the Lord destroyed this entire Egyptian army. So it's because they trusted in God and they did what he said that the Lord fought for them. If they would have tried to go and fight for themselves, it probably wouldn't work out for them, right? But instead, they decided that they would trust God, and because they trusted God, we see how the Lord fought for them and destroyed the entire Egyptian army. So now the people are excited because now they have no one chasing them, no enemies anymore, right? They don't have anybody to worry about. Now they can get to the promised land in peace. They don't have to worry about the Egyptians or Pharaoh coming to capture them and get them. And so as soon as they finish crossing over the sea, they see how the Lord fought for them. They began to praise, they danced and sung songs before the Lord because they were just grateful that God had protected and kept them and fought for them. So they have no reason to doubt the Lord, right? So that we say. So when we get back from Thanksgiving, though, we'll see if they've learned how to trust God or not. Okay? All right, so that's it, guys. That's what our test will be on tomorrow. I'll have a few questions. It will not be a long test at all. Since we're about to go into a break week, we're kind of easing into it. So we'll just have maybe like 10 or 15 questions on our test on tomorrow, okay? All right, or along with your books of the Bible and your memory scripture. All right, guys, so that's it for our Bible this morning.